You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered. And this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Glad to have you here on this start of this week. Getting a lot going. Thanks for chipping in, filling in, and taking some time to explain the Derby to you last Friday. Glad to have them and their insights, because most of us just watch a horse race. The horses run around the track. Somebody wins, somebody loses. Well, last week you got to find out all the behind-the-scenes stuff, and I appreciate them going in-depth with you on the time on Friday's Finest. This week, a lot of stuff still to discuss. I'm going to get into the politics of the college riots. I know we've talked about it a little bit before from the Bob mentality and other things, but some things are continually popping up about this that I want to continue to deal with a little bit, especially when it comes to the implications and the political implications of what's going on here. Also, Google's at it again. I'll get to that in a little bit about the Trump ad, and then the Gaza situation, the Hamas-Israel war, the actual war that's causing so much problems over here. We'll get into that as well. So right after the break, we'll be right back with the Doug Collins Show. We are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been a disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a consistent issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market, and there have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East that have potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. There are so many reasons that Americans should consider investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero-hassle, education-first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. That's what I do. So go to www.legacypminvestments.com to download their free gold investment guide. And look, I've read it. You need to read it. There's so much valuable information in there. So, friends, now's the time to not roll the dice with your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that gold and precious metals can offer you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals today and tell them that Doug Collins sent you. You might have heard Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of the box stores or the shopping channels the way they used to. They've been part of the cancel culture, so they want to pass the savings directly on to you by having a $25 extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just one product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products. Some of you may not even know about that. So to get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out the $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-pillow use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. There's 6-pack of towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels. You guessed it, just $25. And for the first time ever, the MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, just $25. All orders over $75 will see free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long, so go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Collins, that's COLLINS, or call 800-986-3994 today. That's promo code Collins. All right, let's get into I'm going to start off here because this is the story that never goes. It's not just going away. It's become multiple days of the college riots, in the takeovers, the other things. You can definitely begin to see, probably more than any other events in the country right now, the differences in why our country is very divided right now. And you see this in New England, you see it in California, although California is the Los Angeles County area, especially, is taking down these cities in UCLA and USC. Again, they have enough problems in Los Angeles that they don't need to be dealing with this. But also you have what has been going on through what we'll just say is the Southern, the SEC. The riots would start and pro Israel and American, saving the flag in North Carolina, which has become a thing. And of course, then you have some who, again, as you see, it takes too far on this. And as you go, they come up, and the pro-Hamas agitators, and this is why I'm calling them agitators, because right now the mainstream media wants to portray them as college students. Even the New York City police and the Columbia police admitted that more than half of those in the Columbia encampment and others were not college students. And you're finding the same thing over and over and over again in many of these other college towns that we're going to. Is that these are professional agitators. Now there's becoming more and more evidence out there that you're having these professional agitators who are encouraging and talking and getting into the chat groups and others at different campuses after they've already started the protest, and they're agitating them, saying, okay, here's how you escalate, here's how you go to this. And so you really have a cottage industry out there of political hacks and, basically, insurgents who are out there trying to disrupt our college campuses. The tactic, and I say this with some, not trepidation, I just say it with honesty, you're looking a lot like, for the Democratic Party, this is the 68 version of the Democratic Party coming into 2024, and it's the last thing Joe Biden needs. Joe Biden already has enough problems with crime and economics and just the general feeling of ineptness that his administration is giving off. And now you throw on top of this his own side basically revolting against him. And this is something that's a narrative you don't see as much in the mainstream media. If you're just watching your evening news, you're probably not listening to this podcast, I'll be frank with you. But if you are, and I'm glad you are, you're not getting this story. This is not the story that the mainstream media, the other legacy medias, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, to an extent is, but not very, Los Angeles Times. These are just not reporting the issues that are surrounding the internal struggles of the Democratic Party right now concerning the basically just dead revolt against Joe Biden and the not going far enough left. And now everybody else in the country is looking at this and saying, they've went so far left, they've lost most of the country in determination, but yet we're sitting here seeing a group of agitators that are saying, no, you've not went far enough into socialism and far enough into basically this placating terrorist attitude with open borders and everything else. So again, this is a difficult time if you're the Biden administration. If you're the Biden White House, you've got to be looking at this. Polls are starting to show up in this, and I think this is one of the things that you're seeing. The interesting thing, though, is you look at polls and how this is going to affect, because I want to use the college riots as a political effect, is what does it mean politically? And I think the biggest thing here is right now is it's eating away at the down item issues on polling. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. And we've had, and we'll probably get John McLaughlin and some others back on here in the near future to talk polling on this cycle as we've had before. But one of the things you look at in polling is you look at the top line numbers and you say, okay, what is, the likely voters, all adults, definite voters. I mean, there's different ways to look at these registered voters in looking at how you do polling. Now, what is happening right now is if you just do everybody off the street, Trump's winning. And I think that's something you got to be very aware of. What does that mean? That means that the general mood, this is why you're seeing the right direction, wrong direction. This is why you're seeing people who are frustrated. This is why even in these college riots, you're seeing the blank Joe Biden chants being cited by both sides. I mean, can you imagine being a political director in the White House, or even the president himself, if he actually watches TV and understands, seeing the pro-Hamas rioters in some of the southeast, Alabama, I think was one of them, LSU was another, in which both sides were chanting derogatory comments about the president. Now think about that one for a second. You got the far left and the right both up against this president. So when you look at it, this is what the national mood picks up. And I think we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about the national mood and what the indicators of national mood. Indicators of national mood many times don't reflect. They do reflect all adults. They're just a massive polling, Gallup polling, other polling. They just reflect adults in general. They don't dig down to registered voters or likely voters. Those are the kind of things that differentiate political campaigns and consultants as they go forward. And the likely voter, registered voter kind of concept is definitely more what the campaigns are looking at. So when you look at this, all of them are within margin of error. I think that's the one thing to think about. If you see a poll right now, presidential poll, they're all basically within margin of error. Even when you throw in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and others, it's still basically margin of error at the top. And depending on the state, it's determined on how much it's affecting Trump or how much it's affecting Biden. And I think that one will soothe itself out later. I think it will, in the end, Kennedy in particular will be affecting more Biden than Trump, because I think Trump's team is already looking at that. You're already seeing some negative or contrast pieces, however you want to put it, against Kennedy going forward. That is just to remind people that he's not a conservative. He's not a libertarian, even in many ways. He is a liberal. And that is running on some ideas that just resonate, such as vaccines and such as the government mandates and things like that. So I say this just to say, what is the political aptitude? Because when you get into the numbers, if it's all voters, it's Trump by a couple of points. If you get into registered voters, you're looking at it as, basically even again, but it goes to Biden. Likely voters is a very similar situation. So it's 1 or 2 point different. Either way, margin of error could go 3 or 4 points both ways. But then you drop down. As I said earlier, you're dropping down into other items like direction of country. What do you think about national security? What do you think about immigration? What do you think about economy? What do you think about these different issues? And that is where Joe Biden's campaign has the biggest problem. His backstop against that, because he's losing 15, 20 points in some of these polls on those immigration issues, national security issues, economic issues, the direction of the country. This is all bad. And so the question is how does Joe Biden win? Well, he has to secure his liberal base who would never vote for anybody else except the Democratic candidate. This Gaza pro-Hamas rioting and disbarking from the Democratic line is affecting Joe Biden, as you're seeing, and we've talked about this in the race for the none of the above kind of candidates that you saw in Michigan, you saw it in Maryland, you saw it in several other places, Illinois, that is heavily affecting Joe Biden in areas where he can't afford to lose that many voters. Now, the other side will say, well, Trump has people who are voting for Nikki Haley in 15 or 16%. I don't disagree, but I find it very hard to believe that all of those 15 or 16% will simply not vote for Trump. They definitely not going to vote for Biden, but they're not going to vote for Trump, especially if they feel the direction of the country is at risk. And so I think you'll see most of those come back, because it's not an ideological difference. It's more of a choice, and at least it appears this way, a preferential issue. We would have rather had X candidate than Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is a Republican. I use Bill Barr, former Attorney General, in that regard as well. I mean, he's voting for Donald Trump, although he and Donald Trump, are not seeing eye to eye on almost anything these days. He's still voting for Donald Trump because the Biden administration is a disaster. So when you get to these who are not voting for Joe Biden on uncommitteds, they're voting because, especially what we're seeing here, is either the liberal agenda is not going far enough, or, and the main reason this picked up recently is this fact of the Biden stance on Israel, which, in my opinion, is the right stance with Israel because of the terrorist groups Hamas and Hezbollah and the others. But they've seized upon this aspect of the campaign, and they're trying to make their will be felt. The problem is, like in everything, it goes. They've attacked the very institutions of America. I mean, when you're defaming a statue of George Washington, when you're tearing down or taking down American flags and putting Palestinian flags up on college campuses, I mean, you're losing the PR battle here. Okay, among most Americans, there's that subset of 5 to 10% that you may be trying or thinking you're winning at this point. But at the process that you're looking at, then this is going to be a problem for Joe Biden. So the political aspects of this is they're trying. It took up until last week, and the end of last week, before Joe Biden would actually really condemn the violence on campus. Again, this is also pitting. We could go into this a lot deeper. And it's pitting two very reliable Democratic voter blocs in recent elections against each other. That very liberal immigrant vote, the Muslim vote, others that have voted Democratic, and against the Jewish vote, which has been also heavily Democratic in many of these northern and northeastern states and other places. It's pitting, two of your own groups against each other. And Joe Biden's campaign is having to balance the two loads here between the very liberal side and then the Jewish side that is feeling very much left out of this because of the very anti-Semitic turn and very ugly turn on most of these college campuses that are happening right now. So what does that mean, bigger picture? It means right now that the campus riots are, and I think Joe Scarborough and several other liberal pundits have already talked about this, this is giving Donald Trump just fodder for a fall campaign, and they've already started it. And which brings me up into one, I'm going to touch on this briefly. We'll probably do other episodes about the Google ban. Donald Trump's team already came up with an ad, a very hard-hitting political ad that was aimed more at minority voters and others, especially with the craziness that is going on. And remember, every time Joe Biden now talks about the issue of student loans, Donald Trump can say, look, you're wanting to get rid of student loans for these people that are rioting on campuses. You're subsidizing basically these colleges to train people who don't like America. I mean, it's just an easy political pitch here. And Google banned the ad after a lot of uproar from the right, put it back up. And it's a very good ad. If you look at it, it's out there. You can go see it. And it's a very hard-hitting ad. And it's the kind of ad that Biden can't answer right now. So when he tried to answer it last week, he'd already been silent for 2 weeks. And that just continues the process of the problem. So looking at it from a political perspective, this is giving fodder for the Trump campaign to continue this sort of message that Joe Biden's leadership is leading us into division, leading us into away from our traditional allies, or leading us away from the problems here in the country. It is interesting to me that Democrats, who typically try to do so much on domestic policy, this is an administration that seems to have a deafness to domestic policies when it comes to immigration, economics, what's happening on college campuses and things like that, and the effect that it has on average American voters who don't, they're not the ones protesting. They're the ones getting them going to work every day. They're the ones that are wondering why it's costing, more and more, it's 20% higher now to buy bread and buy milk and buy eggs and buy gas and pay for a house. And now that the average payment is becoming, the average homeowner has to earn more than $100,000 a year to afford the median house range in most localities. This is what they're feeling, and the Biden administration just seems completely tone deaf to it. I mean, they're talking about energy prices. They're still talking about cutting American supply. They're still cutting off ANWR in Alaska for drilling. They're still going at the open border policy, which is still going to be, I believe, a major issue coming up in the elections in the fall. So these you pile now on top of that, these campus riots, and the political cost is coming out of the hide of Joe Biden. The one thing right now that you're starting to see, and I was one of the first to actually talk about this, I believe, at least on podcasts or other places, is if they believe that these campus riots, this is before the campus riots, if you are concerned about 1968 being revisited, then Joe Biden's Democratic National Convention going to Chicago in this summer is going to be one of those issues that you just really are struggling to make sure it works out, because the historical precedent here with the Vietnam War, the protesters, 68 became the just very much indelible print on the American psyche, and also the death knell of the Democratic Party nationally for several years. because of the lawlessness that was created there. We'll see what happens. We're in a modern era. We'll see what happens in Chicago 24. But I think these riots are giving an outside, especially these outside agitators who have been, begging for years to have something to do. And the throwbacks to the 60s, hippie wannabes, they're making their mark right now because they're using the tools of technology. They're using the tools of the internet to be able to plop into themselves into riots all across the country at lightning speed, real time speed, whereas before if you go back to the 60s, they were having to travel between, they were having to use, old telephones. There was just a lot more connectivity we have today that's going to allow them to plan and agitate more and more as they come. So these college riots are becoming more and more of a political liability. I just say, you look at how this is all going to ferret out as we go forward here. And then the ultimate underlying of this all, and I want to end here today, is the Hamas-Israel war. We just found out this past week that Israel is ammunition supply from the U.S. is being cut off for at least a short amount of time. I'm not sure what the delay will be, but it's being reported that is being cut off. We'll see how that actually works going forward, especially as the Rafah and other invasions are imminent. And Hamas is still fighting. And if you don't believe it, just this weekend, they shelled an Israeli outpost outside of Gaza, killing 10. They're still attacking humanitarian aids. As long as the world is begging for humanitarian aid to get to the Palestinians in Gaza, it is the Palestinians who are being tortured by their own leadership in Hamas, the terrorists in Hamas, who are keeping them from it. So again, it's this catch-22. Hamas is the problem, the terrorists are the problem, but yet everybody else is being blamed, including Israel, to back down while the terrorists run rampant over the people of Palestine in the Palestinian settlement there in Gaza. So the one last thing that I've mentioned before, is actually coming back up again, is that finally the United States and others are putting pressure on Qatar to say if Hamas doesn't begin to agree to some of these issues, then we're going to make sure that you kick the leadership, which should have been kicked out on October the 7th, back to, if they want to lead the war, then they need to go back to Gaza and lead the war. They don't need to lead it from the high rise and penthouses of Qatar. And that's becoming more and more of an issue now. So a lot of things coming up. That's where the Biden administration is putting a lot of their time trying to get a ceasefire. They're trying to get something in there that shows that this is over, because they realize this is a political dynamite in this campaign season, that they believe that they could focus on Trump and trials and everything else, but they have their own problem that is worse than anything else. Because right now, most people view the trials of Donald Trump, especially when the cases get laid out, and the trial of Donald Trump right now in this money case in D.C. and in New York is a joke. And people are beginning to realize that. So as we look at this going forward, that's where we're at here on this Monday. Glad you're with us here on the Doug Collins Podcast. We'll see you next time.